Biden's Disinformation Board, or what others are calling the Ministry of Truth, has been forced to pause as the Biden administration rethinks their plan to suppress free speech. Why would the Biden administration, who represents the freest nation on the planet, want to extend authoritative power to the WHO? It is extremely dangerous to give the leader of the WHO, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, authority power over America when it is known fact the CCP backed him up to become the Director General of the WHO in the first place. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together.
The Department of Homeland Security says not only has it put a pause on the board, but it's also accepted a letter of resignation from the board's leader. Virginia Democrat Senator Tim Kaine says he's not surprised by this announcement because he felt the announcement of the board was clunky. He does believe disinformation is a huge problem for the country. He pointed out how it can lead to violence, giving examples of the alleged Buffalo shooter's motive.
I can give you chapter and verse evidence that it's a real problem. Gross, twisted, violent disinformation online, and it's poisoning their brains. And we see this happen again and again and again in this country.
First of all, like I said, this is what's happening. There is a pause. We did not have an involvement in this at all.
3 weeks back, the Biden administration launched the controversial Disinformation Governance Board after noticing Elon Musk was trying to restore freedom of speech by owning Twitter. However, as the Department of Homeland Security failed to answer the question of why the board would not be used by the administration to suppress freedom of speech, the government has decided to put a hard pause on its future. Now, according to DHS, the board will not convene and its work will be paused, although officials will carry out critical work across several administrations to address disinformation that threatens the security of our country in the meantime. Furthermore, Nina Jankowicz, who the administration claimed was an expert in identifying online disinformation and was made in charge of the board by the White House, has now submitted her resignation with reasons of uncertain future of the board. The reason for her resignation can be linked with the backlash she received by the citizens after they discovered her older Twitter post in which she made unauthenticated claims that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. Another significant post also came into the picture when she shared tips on the controversial Steele dossier report, which was used to develop invalid relations between former President Trump and Russia. However, Nina tried to defend her position by stating, "After 6 years dedicated to the study of disinformation and best practices in responding to it, I joined the Department of Homeland Security to be the executive director of the Disinformation Governance Board, with the intention of supporting the department's important work addressing disinformation that affects the homeland." White House Deputy Press Secretary Andrew Bates and DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas also tried to defend Nina and the board. Andrew Bates said, "Neither Nina Jankowicz nor the board have anything to do with censorship or with the removing of content from anywhere. Their role is to ensure that national security officials are updated on how misinformation is affecting the threat environment. She has strong credentials and a history of calling out misinformation from both the left and the right." Mayorkas added, "Board does not have any operational authority or capability. It is grossly and intentionally mischaracterized." Nevertheless, both the leaders failed to address the serious concerns about whether the Disinformation Governance Board would monitor U.S. citizens or not. Republicans and other critics also compared the board with George Orwell's fictional novel, 1984, which talked about mass surveillance and using the viewpoint of the citizens for political purposes. Republicans further observed that the board was created to completely suppress conservative views and individuals with views outside the mainstream. Not to forget, the board came to light just a few days after Elon Musk decided to purchase Twitter for $44 billion. After hearing the news about the board, the richest man in the world expressed his response on Twitter by posting that the panel's creation was discomforting.
China's cover-up of the Wuhan virus allowed the disease to spread all over the world, instigating a global pandemic that has cost more than 100,000 American lives and over 1 million lives worldwide. We will be today terminating our relationship with the World Health Organization and redirecting those funds to other worldwide and deserving urgent global public health needs.
For the United States to rejoin the World Health Organization and to reestablish our Global Pandemic Office in the National Security Council.
The role of the United States, its global role, is very, very crucial. And I send my deep thanks and warm congratulations to President Biden and Vice President Harris and to the American people.
July 2020, former President Donald Trump issued a notice of withdrawal of the U.S. from the World Health Organization after noticing the organization's excessive favorability towards defending China about the origin of coronavirus. And now with his constant effort to prove he is somehow better than former President Trump, President Biden has decided to not only rejoin the WHO, but also has proposed to give authoritative powers to the organization, which could result in devastating consequences, as it allows them to even impose economic sanctions on countries who don't comply with its rules. According to recent reports, the Biden administration is moving forward to make the proposed amendments to the WHO's governing regulations that empowers its Director General, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, to declare public health emergency on any nation on the basis of any evidence he considered sufficient for such declaration. The objective behind these amendments is to create a transparent process so that the world can be prepared to take countermeasures before another pandemic tries to hide from us through misinformation about its presence. This directly responds to the May 2021 UN report, which claimed that the pandemic could have been avoided if the international health organizations had more powers. During a virtual meeting of WHO's executive board that was held on January 26, Lois Pace, who is the Assistant Secretary for Global Affairs at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, described the contents of the letter he wrote as the importance of equity and equitable access to medical countermeasures and the negative impacts of misinformation and disinformation related to the pandemic. We agree that we must all do better. The United States led an inclusive and transparent process to develop this decision, as we are mindful that updating and modernizing the IHR, International Health Regulations, are critical to ensuring the world is better prepared for and can respond to the next pandemic. Now, we all understand and agree that we need a strong mechanism that protects the world from any upcoming pandemic. However, if you look at the changes that are proposed by the Biden administration, you will be surprised to know where his actions are heading. For example, the proposal recommends removing an existing requirement mentioned under Section 9 of the WHO regulations, which explains that the organization, before making any public declaration, is required to consult and seek verification from the officials of a nation in which a health crisis is expected to rise in the near future. Before making any decision, WHO could consider reports from sources other than official notifications from the nation with the suspected problems. Furthermore, authoritarian powers are also proposed under Section 10 of the regulations, which explains that if a country does not cooperate with the WHO within 48 hours of the suspected disease, then it has the authority to share the same information with other nations by keeping in mind the seriousness of the public health risk. And if needed, it can also impose economic sanctions. Other amendments suggested by the Biden administration refer to Section 5 of the WHO regulations, in which the organization is required to establish an early warning system and analysis and progressively update the national, regional, or global risks posed by an event of unknown causes or sources. If you look at the changes that are proposed under Section 9 and 10 of the regulations, it clearly shows how massively it can be misused by the Director General of WHO against any country he wants. Words like no verification is needed from a country about the suspected disease, that it could consider reports other than official notifications of the nation, and how it could impose economic sanctions openly represents more damage to the country than what a suspected disease could cause. Because if the WHO fails to verify its decision, then it would be left with no option but to blame the country for the disease. From travel bans to closing down factories and much more, we have all seen how badly an economy gets affected by a rising pandemic. But if the WHO will be allowed to make decisions on the basis of facts or reports that are not covered under the official notification of a country, then it could result in serious consequences for the entire world. And with the rising amount of fake news circling around social media, it even becomes hard for the state authorities to identify the source of its creator. Not to forget, nowhere in the proposed amendments of the related documents was it mentioned how or why U.S. public health officials believe that global healthcare crises in the future could be averted by giving Tedros, the current Director General of WHO, the authority to declare a public health emergency on the basis of information provided by a source other than the affected nation. Serious questions are also being raised about Tedros' credibility after China backed him up in May 2017 election that eventually helped him become the current Director General of WHO. According to Dr. Peter Breggin, who is a Harvard-trained psychiatrist and a former U.S. Public Health Service officer, the amendments would give WHO the right to take important steps to collaborate with other nations and other organizations worldwide to deal with any nation's alleged health crises, even against its stated wishes. The power to declare health emergencies is a potential tool to shame, intimidate, and dominate nations. It can be used to justify ostracism and economic or financial action against the targeted nation by other nations aligned with the WHO who wish to harm and control the accused nation. Travis Weber, who is the Vice President for Policy and Governmental Affairs at a Family Research Council in Washington, D.C., says, "The American people need to express concern with the White House, especially as our president represents us on the world stage. We need an explanation of what you are doing here and why." Travis further stressed that the Biden administration officials have not really talked about this, so we need reporters to ask them at a press conference what they are proposing and really get them to explain it. As the proposed amendments by the U.S. were handed over to the WHO in January 2022, they will be discussed by the United Nations 75th World Health Assembly at the end of this month.
Looking at the frustrated Chinese residents suffering through the strictest lockdown for more than 6 weeks, Shanghai has decided to gradually reopen businesses such as shopping malls and hair salons. Apart from this, very few people are getting passes to go outside from their residential compounds.
After 7 weeks of inhumane lockdown and destroying their economy like never before, Shanghai officials have now revealed that they are witnessing zero COVID cases outside the quarantine zones marked by the government. Zhao Dandan, who is the deputy director of the Shanghai Health Commission, stated that all the 16 districts in Shanghai have now achieved social dynamic zero COVID for 3 straight days, which means all the new cases are arising only in the residential areas that are already going through a severe lockdown procedure. The officials have also revealed the timetable for reopening the economy from the beginning of June. However, residents are claiming that they have lost their trust in the government after experiencing the extension of the lockdown for 7 weeks, while it was promised to last for only 8 days. As of May 18th, the local officials have stated that around 790,000 people are going through strict lockdown measures. But as China has a long reputation of hiding its truth from the world, residents and experts are claiming that the real number are much higher than what is revealed. According to a resident named Chen, every house is given a pass that can be used to exit the residential complex for buying essential items. But the haunting part is that pass is valid for only a few hours, and if they fail to come back within the fixed period, the authorities will snatch their pass from them. Chen said he is still unable to connect with his daughter, who only lives a 45-minute drive from the residential complex he is currently being locked down in. Migrants, on the other hand, are finding every opportunity to escape from the city. Various social media posts have shown long lines of migrants waiting to grab a ticket at the railway station to return home. A delivery man named Lu stated that he heard one of his co-workers had to pay $74 extra for a ticket to his desired location, while others are escaping by foot to get to their homes, and even if they manage to reach home, they will have to undergo a strict quarantine period for an entire week. Sun Wei, whose salary was blocked for 2 months, finally managed to obtain permission from the authorities to leave the city. She said, If I had continued to stay in Shanghai, I would have starved to death. If we talk about their economic growth, the American Chamber of Commerce in China has already revealed that its zero COVID policy has now convinced the foreign investors to avoid investing their capital in the country for years to come. Furthermore, big firms like Tesla and Apple, having their plants in the city, are already looking for alternatives to ensure a smoother supply chain process. And lastly, the recent data published by the National Bureau of Statistics revealed that the country's unemployment rate has hit a 2-year high after noticing the worst retail sales and factory output since the pandemic. That's it for today, my friends. Thank you for spending time with me, and I'll see you next time.